we'll put them at the bottom of that, and I'll shoot from here, and we'll get this right here. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to go up there in front of, right in the center.
What's the picture for?
For Claudia.
Oh, wait, okay.
Put you right here. Let's put Andrew in the middle. We'll put Bobby on one side and Grant's front row. Just for my OCD, I'm going to slide it that way just a little bit. Perfect. Now we're symmetrical. That's good. For my OCD, we'll go with mine first, and we can shift. All right. Perfect. That looks good like that, guys. Good. 1, 2, 3. Big smile, guys. Perfect. One more. Yes, please smile.
I'm supposed to be tough guys.
1, 2, 3. Perfect. Like that. One more. Because somebody has their eyes closed. There we go. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. Appreciate you coming. So like, my partner in crime is down in Florida this week. He's actually a Florida game.
Around and doing that. So
Hello?
it's not on. You have to click that on. Hi, Robin.
Hello? Hello?
I haven't missed on something, so see her now. I don't, but I would.
It's not working.
Bobby told me, Cassie told me everything was checked, and Bobby told me when I turned it on, it's hot.
I have to leave at 7:30-ish. With the mic? Okay, thanks.
This is no. When you put it on, it's hot.
No, it's not.
No, no, no. When you put it on, when you flip.
Then when you talk into it, it's, it's not loud. See?
Good evening, everybody. I think we're going to get started here, so please find a seat. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bobby Naimark. I'm the proud Donor Impact Officer for the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts. Thank you for all of those that are here in person at beautiful Temple Bethel in Springfield, and also joining us virtually for this crucial discussion on Jewish community security. We are honored to welcome Grant Mendenhall, Director of Operations, and Andrew Hoffman, Deputy Regional Security Advisor from the Secure Community Network, the official safety and security organization of the Jewish community in North America. We also extend, again, thank you again for Temple Bethel for hosting us tonight. We really appreciate all the team here. Since October 7th, we have witnessed an unprecedented surge in anti-Semitism, both globally and here at home. Since then, we have seen a sharp rise in threats and attacks targeting Jewish individuals, institutions, and businesses. And since October 2023 alone, SCN has logged over 8,000 threat and suspicious activity reports across the United States. This is not just a statistic. It is a stark reminder of why security must remain a top priority for all of us. In response to these growing threats and violence targeting Jewish institutions and people, the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts is proud to partner with SCN, joining a national network of Jewish federations and communities working to strengthen and expand security initiatives. The Federation has committed to a multi-year partnership with SCN, investing $200,000 annually to strengthen security measures across Western Massachusetts. Through this partnership, we are building a community-wide security program designed around an all threats, all hazards approach, ensuring that we are not only prepared, but proactive in protecting our institutions, our families, and our future. Tonight, Grant and Andrew will provide an overview of our new partnership, discuss the current security landscape, highlight available training and resources, and address your questions and concerns. Security is a shared responsibility. And by working together, we can ensure that our community remains safe, strong, and resilient. Please join me in welcoming Grant Mendenhall and Andrew Hoffman.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see everybody here. It's great to see our law enforcement partners here. Thanks, guys, for being here. Really appreciate it. I'll start the way I always start when I'm in front of a group in the Jewish community, by saying, I wish we weren't here. I wish we weren't doing this tonight. I wish Bobby didn't have to talk about anti-Semitism tonight and the impact that it has on our community, this community, and Jewish communities all around the United States and around the world. I wish we didn't have to do that. That's the world we wish we lived in. That's the hope-for world that we're moving towards every day. It's not the world we're living in right now, unfortunately. And for that reason, it makes it even more important that you're all here tonight to have this hard discussion, to talk about the future of safety and security in the community here in Western Mass. It's extremely important that you're all here and that you're all engaged. And I should mention again, this night is about all of you. It's not necessarily about me or Andrew or even Bobby. This is about you as a community. It's about how this partnership is going to serve your community going forward, hopefully in perpetuity, to make this community as absolutely safe and secure as it possibly can be into the future. So that's why we're here. And I appreciate you all being here. I'm going to challenge you now with something, and I'll come back to it at the end. The fact that you all are here brings with it a burden. I believe because you're here, you're now ambassadors for this program. You're partners with Andrew and Bobby and all of your counterparts throughout the Jewish community here in Western Massachusetts. You're ambassadors for the program. I'll come back to that at the end and maybe leave you with a little bit of a challenge. So we'll come back to that. Let me give you a little bit of, I'll give you a little bit of my background, and along with that, a little bit of background of the Secure Community Network and kind of what got us to this night here together. We're a growing organization, and again, unfortunately, we have to. I started with SCN about 5 years ago in Indianapolis in the same role that Andrew has here. I started as the security director in Indianapolis after a 30-year career in the FBI. I started with the Federation in the 5th safety and security program that SCN managed in the United States. SCN had 21 employees at the time. I was employee number 21. Andrew is now representing the 33rd safety and security program that SCN manages around the country. And we just started our first program in Canada, in Hamilton, Ontario, about a month and a half ago. So we've gone from 5 safety and security programs in 2020 to 33 now, covering 44 Jewish federations around the United States. Does anybody know how many federations there are in the United States? Anybody? 146. Does that number sound familiar? There are 146 federations and about 350 independent and network communities that don't fall under a federation, a Jewish federation catchment area. SCN covers 43 of those federations right now. Our independent partners, such as the Safety and Security Program at Combined Jewish Philanthropies in Boston, a program run by Jeremy Yaman, one of our counterparts. It's a program not managed by SCN, but it's a partner program. So programs like that cover another 50 federations across the United States. So when you do the math, out of 146 federations, about 100 of the 146 have some type of safety and professional safety and security program like you now have here. That means there's about 50 that have nothing. We've got a lot of work to do, which makes it even more important that you all are here tonight to help us do this work and expand the work we do all across the country. So again, thank you for being here. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the way I view Andrew's role, some of the things he's going to do, and some of the things that you may think he's going to do that he probably won't do. I really boiled down the role of a security director, and this has kind of evolved in my mind through serving in the same role that Andrew's in here as a security director, and now having responsibility for all our programs around the country and kind of seeing how our programs have evolved. Andrew's not a security guard. You have security guards in your community working with your organizations, and that's a great thing. That's not Andrew's role. I view Andrew's role first and foremost as an educator and the Chief Empowerment Officer for Safety and Security for all of your organizations here in your community. Education and empowerment. And there's a number of ways he's going to do that, like training. A key component of an SCN program is ongoing training, which is going to be starting here in your community very soon. Another way Andrew is going to educate and empower is by doing risk assessments at every facility in your community, determining what risk and vulnerabilities you have at your synagogues and schools and at the JCC, and helping you determine the best way to fill those gaps and address those vulnerabilities. So that's another way he's going to educate and empower. Another way that you may not think about is ongoing consultations with everybody in this room, leadership in your community, and just community members at large who have questions and concerns about safety and security, from personal safety and security in their own homes to how do we handle security for a bar mitzvah? Should we have armed security in our synagogue? And should we have a fence around our synagogue? You name it. Andrew's going to be here to provide consultation and help every organization get to the best place they can possibly be when it comes to safety and security and resilience. You may think that a program like this brings with it a template that we just kind of drop on top of the community and say, everybody just do these 10 things and everybody's going to be safe and secure and everybody's going to be happy. It doesn't really work that way. We certainly will offer best practices to every one of your organizations across the spectrum of safety and security, from training to risk assessments to, again, the questions about do we use armed security, should we have a fence, all those types of things. But the answer to those questions is different here than it is across the street or down the street at the JCC. The answer for every Jewish organization looks a little different, because every Jewish organization and the leaders of every Jewish organization have different views on what safety and security means for them. So there's no standard answer. There are best practices. What I call the magic is in finding the right answer for every organization that provides, as close to perfect as we can get, a perfect balance of security and remaining open and welcoming to the community. That's really ultimately what we're talking about. How can we ensure safety and security, resilience for our community without turning our community into a fortress? Remaining welcoming and open to the community. That's a key component of Andrew's mission going forward, is working with all of you and your counterparts across the community to strike that perfect balance for every organization. And again, the answer is going to be a little bit different for every one of your organizations. Another key function that Andrew's going to play is to liaison and interact and problem solve with our law enforcement partners, three of whom are represented here tonight. Your organizations already have fantastic relationships with the police department, and some of you with our state partners and our federal partners like the FBI. Andrew is going to become a focal point for your community when it comes to liaison and interaction with the police department. And where that really is beneficial to your community day to day, when you think about the police, oftentimes we think about responding if something happens, right? And of course, that's a key component of what our law enforcement partners do. That's why they're called first responders. But keep in mind something that I think is even more important when it comes to our relationship, your relationship with our law enforcement partners. The Jewish community hosts a lot of special events continuously throughout the year. And as we've seen, especially since October 7th, making sure those events are safe and secure has become even more critical now than it ever has been. A huge component of Andrew's job is working with our local, state, and federal partners in making sure that we're doing the right thing to protect our mass gatherings, our special events, day to day, week to week, because as you all know, they happen very frequently in our community. So that's a key part of Andrew's job is conducting that type of liaison and in some cases influencing our law enforcement partners when it comes to providing that umbrella of security that we need from them from time to time. So that's another key component. I'm going to finish with this. I'm going to tell you that Andrew is not what you might think he is. Some of you may think he's Captain America. He's not. He's your community security director, and he needs your help. One thing that he's going to be doing very quickly is bringing together a community security committee, which is going to be made up of key points of contact in every Jewish organization here in Western Mass and up in the Berkshires to be focal points for your organizations. I already know who that is here. It's going to be an informal group that will form the foundation for this program throughout the community, and where the conversation about safety and security will start and end is with that community security committee. Many of your organizations already have some type of security committee already in place, and those are the logical people that could be part of this, or part of Andrew's community security committee as well. Hugely important. And back to my comment at the beginning, and here's the challenge. Be an ambassador for the program. If there's an opportunity for you to volunteer to be a part of your synagogue's safety committee or to be a part of Andrew's community safety and security committee, please think about it. Please think about being that point of contact for your organization. And here's my final challenge. You're going to see Andrew a lot going forward. If you don't see him anywhere else, you're going to see him at congregational level training, and hopefully you're going to see him at community level training. One of Andrew's biggest challenges, if he's in this job for 4 years or if he's in this job for 15 years, is going to be to get people to come to training. Training, SCN views training as an ongoing process, kind of like fire drills in elementary schools. You have to do it repeatedly. I challenge all of you not only to be ambassadors for the program, volunteer for the program, but when you see that Andrew's holding training at your synagogue or at the JCC or whatever the case may be, do your best to support Andrew and your fellow congregants and community members by encouraging people to come to training. That's my challenge to all of you. Be ambassadors for the program, please. Andrew is going to need your help. This is a community effort. It's a community partnership. And the fact that you're all here tells me and tells everybody else here that you're interested and you're engaged. So take that interest and engagement to the next level and think about being an ambassador for the program. So thank you for listening, and I'm going to turn the mic over to your new community security director, Andrew Hoffman.
Thank you, Grant. Thanks everyone for coming out. Thank everyone who's watching online. Thank our local law enforcement partners who are out here tonight with us. So I am Andrew Hoffman. I'm the new Deputy Regional Security Advisor for Secure Community Network, which is kind of a mouthful. So I'd like to give you a little bit about my background and kind of tell you a little bit about what brought me here. I spent the last 26 years as a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration. So I spelled FBI wrong in my job application and ended up at DEA. I worked in New York City, actually did 5 years in the Caribbean, and last 12 years in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I was coming towards the end of my career. We actually have a mandatory retirement age, and like most of my peers, I started looking for a new career. Being in this part of the world, I looked at some insurance companies, I looked at some anti-money laundering jobs, and to be honest, I was completely uninspired by the jobs I was looking at. And what really changed it for me was October 7th, 2023. I really had the same sickening feeling that day that I had after 9/11, and it really sparked an idea in me, and that I can take the skills that I've developed over the last 26 years as an investigator and help the Jewish community. And that's really what led me to learn about Secure Community Network. It's really what led me to be fortunate enough to apply for this job and to, get selected for this job. So that's really what brought me here today. I want to share with you two things that I've learned since I've started this job. And the first thing is, when you hear the name Secure Community Network, the network is an actual real thing. It's a network of 120 employees from many former law enforcement professionals with SCN around the country doing the same job I'm doing. And they're a resource to me. SCN has a training division developing these trainings. We have an intel division. We have a community protection division. I have the resources of all these people. And I'm probably only going to have the answer about 25, maybe 50% of the time. But when I don't have an answer to any of your questions, I have the resources available to get you the answers. There's not a question that you can't ask me that hasn't already been asked in a synagogue in Phoenix or Miami or Boston. And we have the resources available to get those answers. And as Grant said, every facility is different. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach to the community security needs. The other part of that network is our law enforcement partners, is that we partner with law enforcement. They are the guys on the ground. They are the guys out here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, providing protection to the community. And we're here to be a resource, not just to the community, but also to our law enforcement partners to try to build that shield around the Jewish community. One other thing, so I really want to get to the Q&A portion of this, is the mission of Secure Community Network is to ensure the safety, security, and resiliency of the Jewish community. And to me, safety and security don't matter if we don't have the resiliency component. If we can't celebrate Jewish life, or if Jewish life gets interrupted because of these safety concerns, the rest of it doesn't matter. I got to come here, I was invited here at Temple Bethel last Friday night. There was a wonderful Shabbos service. There was a wonderful dinner afterwards. That's why we're here, for these events to take place in a safe and secure manner and be able to celebrate Jewish life. So I'm honored to be here. I'm humbled to be here. Appreciate your support, and I look forward to working with everybody. So with that, I don't turn it back to Bobby for the Q&A. Okay.
For at least the next half hour, so. What questions or concerns or comments?
Can you give us, since it's we're dealing with a pretty extensive network, can you give me a sense of the actual degree of significant danger that exists or that you've looked at and so on?
Hey, Grant, if you can speak into any of the mics, just so people hear.
Can you hear me? Here we go. Hello? So the rabbi asked about what is the real danger to the community day to day. It's different everywhere in the country. So Andrew mentioned our intelligence component, which is in Chicago. I can't talk highly enough about the analysts that work for SCN. We've got a room full of really motivated, talented young people that are staring at the threats to our community all over the United States, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have 18 analysts that are working 24 hours a day, staring at threats. And we were just talking before the program started about the climate of anti-Semitism in our country. And some people would separate anti-Semitism from a discussion about safety and security. and maybe for good reason. A lot of what we consider to be hate speech is also protected by the First Amendment. It's First Amendment protected activity. But here's the puzzle that we have to solve as an organization and as a community. Hate speech, anti-Semitism, while it may be protected by the First Amendment, also in some instances forms the basis for potential acts of violence or criminal activity targeted at our community or against the community at large. So that, in addition to our security directors around the country and the entire network, the work that our analysts do that not only support our security directors and the entire network, but we also sometimes support our law enforcement partners. We like to refer to it as we can sometimes stand in the gaps where our police brothers and sisters can't be. We're a private organization, so we're not governed by the exact same things that our police partners and our federal partners are governed by. In other words, we can stare at threats. Sometimes our analysts can stare at threats longer than our police partners can, or earlier in the cycle, if that makes sense. So that's a long answer to your question, but I think it's an important question. But the acute threat that you're referring to, the Colleyville scenario, worst case scenario, a terrorist attack with a hostage scenario in a synagogue, or Tree of Life. Those incidents were never going to happen there. Nothing ever happens in Colleyville. Nothing ever happens in Squirrel Hill, right? Nothing ever happens at the FedEx facility in Indianapolis. I mean, how many mass shootings do we have in this country every year? We can't even remember them all, right? It's never going to happen here until it does. When I talked about Andrew's mission to educate and empower, what I think about when I think about empowerment is, what can Andrew teach people in your community that will help you do one thing? Prevent the bad day from coming here. I had a conversation with somebody before the program started. We were talking about greeters and ushers in synagogues. You may not want to hear this, because it is hard to hear. Statistically speaking, if the bad day comes to any of your organizations, whether it's the JCC or this synagogue, it's going to come from someone that you let in the front door. If the bad day comes, statistically speaking, it's going to come from someone you let in the front door. There's nothing more important when it comes to education and empowerment than understanding who's coming into your facilities. It's going to come from someone you let in the front door. It's not going to come from somebody that breaks in. It's not going to come from somebody that sneaks in the back door, chances are. It's going to be somebody that comes in the front door. Andrew's going to talk a lot to your community organizations when he does walkthroughs of your facilities about safety and security upgrades for cameras, locks and alarms, access control, key fobs and all those types of things. Window film, shatter-resistant window film, all those types of things. All those things are great, and they're key components of a holistic safety and security program, no doubt, as is armed security where appropriate. None of those things, in my view, are more important than controlling who comes in your building. So, very, very long-winded answer to your question, but I'm glad you asked it.
So in response to that, when you have a synagogue service, which is not a sign-up kind of affair as a dinner or an event, how do you screen? And what do you do? There are police outside at every event, certainly every Jewish event. So you come in, and there are some events where there are name tags. So what happens if somebody comes up to the table or somebody starts to walk through and nobody knows them, which happens, people come into a service, there's no name tag for them. The police are usually outside, not inside. It's the responsibility of lay people, one or two at that table. What are your thoughts about that?
So we're 2 for 2 with great questions. So we didn't come here tonight to do greeter usher training, but you've set the stage. We could do greeter usher training. But we're not going to do that. Andrew will do that with your synagogue soon enough. But you kind of opened a can of worms. But I'm going to boil it down to 2 things that I think are really important. This is the way I think about it. We're talking about the same thing, controlling who comes in. Your lay leaders, your volunteers who volunteer to be greeters and ushers, and if you don't have them now, hopefully you will in the future. No one knows who should be in your building more than your lay leaders, your rabbis, your people that volunteer to be greeters and ushers. You know what right looks like, generally speaking, unless it's a huge special event, High Holy Days, where you've had online registration and that tickets and those types of things. The best case scenario for human interaction at your door, and hopefully you have one point of entry, especially during special events. The best case scenario is some mix between your greeters and ushers and your security component, whether it's off-duty police officers or a professional security guard company. A integration of those 2 components is the best case scenario. And training together, and Andrew's going to be offering this type of training, greeter usher training. Training, best case scenario, we do training here. You have volunteers that are greeters and ushers. We have your security component there for the training, and you train together. So you develop an understanding of what you can handle as a lay leader and what you need to hand off to your police counterparts. Because if you haven't practiced, just like anything else, if you don't practice it, if you don't rehearse it, it's probably not going to happen when the time comes. So understanding who should be here, and again, you know it better than your security guards because you know your congregation. So, but there's certain things that they can do that you can't do because they're law enforcement. And they have arrest powers and all that goes with it. So an integration between your synagogue team and your security component is the best case scenario. And again, Andrew's going to be able to help make that happen. And frankly, we do a lot of different training. Stop the bleed training, countering active threat training, situational awareness training. I don't think there's anything more important that Andrew's going to do in his time here than training exactly what you're talking about. So great question. Thank you. It can be. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, sir.
So what is the status of this program in this particular community? I gather it's just getting started. Have you toured all the facilities? Have you met all of the lay leaders and the clerical staff? Where are we up to and what's going on?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I visited every synagogue between here and Vermont in the last 3 months. So it's been kind of a whirlwind. We've tried to hit every facility. We've hit the Hillel up in Amherst. We've hit the schools. To introduce myself, to explain what the program's all about. And she's in, which synagogue do you belong to? So you should start seeing, and actually, I've already sent an email to the rabbi about starting training. You should start seeing security assessments come up soon. So you should start actually seeing deliverables for this, partnership start pretty soon. So, and just touch on one thing, Susie, that you had said about, it's funny because every synagogue I visited, it's a lot of synagogues are hiring off-duty officers for security. Every single time I hear it, it's, hey, the officer's outside or sits outside. And I want to say one thing. And when we introduce ourselves to law enforcement, we tell them, part of this job is to explain the community needs to law enforcement. It's also explain the law enforcement needs to the community. And I would welcome you and challenge you. You're hiring a trained law enforcement officer. Trust their judgment. If the officer feels it's better to be inside the facility, trust their judgment that that's the best place to be. They're trained. This is what that's what you're hiring them to do. So it is interesting. Every synagogue I visit, it's, the officer is sitting outside. And I would welcome you, invite the officer in, especially when people are coming into services, because they're trained officers. This is why they're here, and this is why you're hiring them. So it's interesting that you say that. So.
Anybody else? Back in the back, Andrew.
Okay, so we're down the street at B'nai Torah, and sometime soon we're going to have a national Jewish speaker who will attract tremendous attention.
Yeah.
Probably not only from the Jewish community, but it might be from other unwanted communities. So how will you guys play a part in working with us to ensure security at this event?
Yeah, great question. I kind of referenced it earlier when I talked about Andrew's role in helping the community prepare for special events. We've had former Israeli prime ministers visit communities around the country where we have programs, which probably, at least in the ballpark of what you're referring to. So Andrew's role in a special event of that caliber is going to be to work with the organization, first and foremost, to develop the appropriate kind of grassroots organizational level safety and security planning, and then take that to our local counterparts, our state counterparts if necessary, and our federal counterparts if necessary, to make sure we're bringing absolutely every resource that's available to the community and to your organization to make sure that that event is safe. And frankly, when you have somebody like Andrew in your community, who's already known to state, federal, and local law enforcement, he gives you a voice and kind of a leg up with your law enforcement partners because he can speak their language and they can speak his language. So if Andrew goes, if you're having a former prime minister come and you're going to host a talk at your synagogue, understanding the security threats that come along with that, and some of them are kind of global level security threats, and translating that to our law enforcement partners, and if there's professional security organizations that are involved in the event as well, that's a key component of what Andrew's going to do. So he can help from the ground up plan for safety and security for that event and make sure that all of the local and federal resources that we can possibly bring to bear are a part of that event. So huge, huge part of what he's going to be involved in.
So are you providing financial resources, or are you providing people? Are you
Planning.
planning? You're not, other
Andrew's
than
going to be the lead planner.
planning?
Absolutely.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so planning,
Yes, sir.
and we take it from there. Very good, okay. Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So my two questions. My first is, with my kindergarten teacher hat on, what does this look like in the schools? I teach up in Northampton, but I imagine, one kindergarten classroom is not that different from another. What does this kind of training look like for me as a teacher?
Yeah, so every training package that SCN delivers, we can deliver at the school level. I did it in Indianapolis when I was the security director there. B'nai Torah was right across the street. Haston Hebrew Academy was right across the street. The first place I conducted training as a brand new security director was for the teachers at Haston Hebrew Academy. We did countering active threat training, and then I actually did practical application in every teacher's classroom. So here's your challenge. I did practical application in every teacher's classroom, not with the students, just with the teachers. And the teachers actually developed their own egress plans for each one of their classrooms individually. And the 3 years that I was there, we came back to it every year and refreshed those plans. Teachers changed classrooms, some teachers left and new teachers came in. So the situational awareness training, countering active threat training are very applicable to the classroom. And in certain circumstances, they can be applicable to the students as well. Obviously at your discretion, but especially those two training courses can be tailored for the classroom very easily.
Thank you. And my second question is, from the cybersecurity aspect, thinking because, again, a school or any organization is definitely a target, does SCN have a package for that?
We don't really have a package
Or
for
in-house
cybersecurity.
training, yeah.
We can certainly help you with it and consult with you on it with cybersecurity 101 type things. I mean, it's under development with SCN. We're in SCN 2.0 now, which started in 2017. SCN 1.0 looked nothing like, it was 4 people and not operational like we are now. But when we became the organization that we are now in 2017, we became hyper-focused on physical safety and security. Safety and security of our facilities and our people first. So cybersecurity is a part of our portfolio. It's not our #1 priority right now, but we can certainly have that conversation and get you to the right solutions, many of which aren't as complicated as you might think they are, like multi-factor authentication, those types of things. So we should definitely have the conversation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
It seems like the cost of security has been forcing an increasing percentage for the synagogue, and I'm especially since October 7th. So my question is, and my sense is that when we hire off-duty police, we get much more for our buck than when we would hire a security firm, not police. But do you have any advice about how we should think about that in terms of what we get for for our dollars for security? Thank you.
Tough question to answer, not knowing what kind of the landscape looks like here in this community when it comes to professional security services. Frankly, the answer is it depends. The best practice, this is my personal opinion, but it's also a best practice that's actually reflected in a SCN publication entitled Firearms and the Faithful. And if you haven't read that, you can find it on our website. Andrew can get it to you. When it comes to armed security, we believe that the best practice is off-duty or on-duty law enforcement. Current, trained, certified law enforcement officers, there's no substitute for that. That's the best practice. There are other solutions, obviously, and I think that's what you're getting at. And the circumstances dictate what's the best solution for your particular synagogue. With current law enforcement being the best case scenario, through private security firms and private security guards, and we are soon to publish a new companion to Firearms and the Faithful that addresses armed congregants, which we don't advocate for. However, more and more across the country, especially since October 7th, more congregations are seeking professional training for congregants to carry firearms in synagogues. Recognizing that it was starting to happen more and more, we made kind of a strategic decision organizationally to get ahead of the curve and provide guidance to the community if community organizations make that decision, or hopefully before they make the decision, to either use armed security of any type, let alone utilize armed congregants. Here are all of the things that you need to take into consideration before you make that decision. From training to organizational liability and everything in between. All of the things that need to be considered. So again, the answer is it depends, but in our view, there's no question that the best practice is current active duty law enforcement. There's no substitute for that. I was a 30-year FBI agent, a member of the SWAT team. I was a sniper. I'm a former Marine. You wouldn't want to hire me as a security guard. I'm not current. I'm not trained anymore. I'm not active. Yeah, I used to be super cool SWAT guy, but I'm not anymore. And there's a lot of used to be super cool SWAT guys that aren't anymore, and women that aren't anymore. There's no substitute for current active duty law enforcement. Thank you. No extra charge for 2 questions.
This isn't a question, actually, it's a comment. Thank you for being here tonight. And while we are currently really launching an initiative, a full-on initiative with Andrew being pretty much on site, close to on site, I do want to point out that with Federation funding, SCAN has been involved with our community since, I believe, 2017, when if some of you may remember, it was really around the time that Israeli kid was calling all the JCCs in the country. And the
bomb threats.
Yeah. Yes, the bomb threats. And we as a community, through Federation, engaged SCAN. And that, some of you may remember that at that point, we did a pretty full-on facilities check, windows, doors, locks, etc. There were grants given for security enhancement. And from then on, There have been Federation funds for enhanced security at the high holidays and at particular times. So I just wanted to point that out, that this isn't, we're not beginning from scratch here in our community. We've been aware of it and on it for almost 10 years.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, 2017 was a long time ago. Yeah.
So 2 questions. The first is the flip side of the question about the schools. The majority of our congregation and many in the area are over the age of 70. And how do you alter your training for those who are less physically abled or those who are senior citizens?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's not unique, right? We deal with that dynamic in every organization where we do training across the country. Run, hide, fight means different things to different people, right? When we do our countering active threat training, that's the mantra, right? Run, hide, fight. Run means something different to me than it does to somebody else. So even though everybody in this room has different physical capabilities, when you do a training like that, and we talked about greeter and usher training, that dynamic in your congregation gets highlighted when you do when you do run, hide, fight training, because it requires some type of physical response. That's why I keep coming back to the importance of greeter usher training. We were talking about greeter usher training in the context of how do we control people that come in our spaces. It's just as important to do greeter usher training to do things like facilitate run, hide, fight for the entire congregation. To be facilitators, to get people to safe rooms, to get people to exits, to get people in a position where they can actually respond appropriately. That's another role of greeters and ushers. So when you think about training your congregation, it's not every man, woman, and child for themselves. At least it shouldn't be, regardless of whether it's a 5-year-old or a 95-year-old. It's congregational training. And if your congregation is majority elderly people, the way your congregation trains and the way your congregation is set up to respond is going to have to be different than a much younger synagogue down the street. So I keep coming back to the concept of trained greeters and ushers. It's not just about controlling who comes in, it's facilitating and helping the people that are here. And it also applies to Stop the Bleed training as well. So, I mean, it's a great point, but it permeates our community. It's that we deal with that every time we train. So creating an environment in your synagogues where it's not every man, woman, and child for themselves, having a safety and security committee, having trained greeters and ushers, having a cadre of lay leaders in every one of your organizations who have gone through as many SCN training programs as they can, as often as they can, that can be facilitators if something happens. First responders, you have to think about a cadre in each one of your organizations as being the first responders. I refer to that cadre as greeters and ushers. So that is a huge component of what we can do.
And my second question, while I have the mic. So Massachusetts, I was surprised to learn recently that Massachusetts ranks very high in anti-Semitic incidents in the country. And there have been some very noticeable ones in the eastern part of the state, like banners unfurled over the highway and very, very visible incidents. And I'm wondering, is that the same around here? Are you finding differences in different regions, or is that pretty even around the state?
I can tell you that I can't really comment about Western Massachusetts as kind of a pocket of this state, But what you just described is happening all over the country. So it's not, unfortunately, wanted posters on college campuses targeting Jewish students and Jewish staff members, banner drops on highways. It's happening on the East Coast, it's happening on the West Coast, it's happening in Florida, in Texas. This is normalized activity in our country now. It's not, and that is, it's so shocking because it's not shocking anymore, if that makes sense. It's happening everywhere in this country, and it's become normalized. The benchmark in time for me was August of 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia. That's the day that changed the trajectory of hate in our country, the attack in Charlottesville. I was actually in Charlottesville that day, visiting my daughter, who was a student at UVA at the time. That moment in time changed the way our country thinks about anti-Semitism and hate speech in general. It's become normalized. We were talking about it before the program. It's shocking because it's no longer shocking. Andrew will soon enough be able to give you a much better idea of how your corner of the state compares to Boston or Connecticut or Austin, Texas. We can certainly do that. You're probably not going to like what you see, unfortunately. That's back to my original comments when I first walked up here. That's the world we live in. And that's the world that we have to operate in. That's the world that we have to collaborate in. Help each other, educate each other, support each other, and be Jewish together. That's the most important part. You said it best, Andrew. Safety and security doesn't matter without the component of resiliency. That's where we are.
This also is more of a comment than a question. I think protecting what we have here as people of the Jewish religion, our institutions, is critical, and thank you very much for bringing all you have to bear for that. I'm involved with our community center here, and you had mentioned earlier when you were talking about that, a vision maybe of a day where we don't have to be doing what we're doing right now. Part of what happens at our JCC, and we talked about this before we started this, is that that's now become a community center for the entire community, not just the Jewish community. And that's a real breakthrough. We have to be able to communicate and establish relationships with people from other communities to support us and to support them. So we take security very seriously at the JCC because we have to make sure that in fact it's a safe environment, not only for the Jewish folks there, but for everybody that's there. That's in our best interests. And we're fortunate to have some professional law enforcement folks to work with us and help us with that. So we're going down that path, but we really look forward to doing more in this area and getting the kind of help that you want. We have to be basically at cutting edge to do this. It's a changing environment all the time. It's not changing in a good way. We have to be continuously adding to what we're doing. So thank you very much for your help.
Thanks for your comments, and you reminded me of something that I should have mentioned earlier. Great point about the JCC, by the way. Like most JCCs around the country, yours is about 40% Jewish membership, right? It's a true community center. So safety and security in the Jewish community is not just about safety and security in the Jewish community, it's about safety and security in the entire community. Which brings me to another point, which is interfaith dialogue. SCN does a lot of work around the country in the interfaith world. You may or may not know that SCN is the only, other than the LDS Church in Salt Lake City, SCN is the only national organization effectively governing safety and security for a faith group. So when you talk about being kind of on the cutting edge of of providing safety and security to the broader community. I think interfaith dialogue, interfaith training is hugely important. Our faith communities will come together for a lot of reasons. There's one reason that they will always come together for, and that is to talk about safety and security. You know, I was in the counterterrorism world for 25 years of my 30-year career in the FBI. A threat to a synagogue today could be a threat to a Catholic church down the street tomorrow. There's a lot of what we refer to as mixed ideologies out there in the world of hate and terrorism. Again, kind of leading the way in safety and security in the interfaith community, I think, is an important function for us. And I think it's an important kind of rallying cry for the interfaith community. It's something that we can come together, it's a topic we can come together on and potentially protect each other in the faith community based on that dialogue. So Andrew will encourage all of your organizations to involve the interfaith community when you do training, at least. When we did a town hall just like this at the JCC in Birmingham, Alabama, about 3 years ago when we started our program there. The Federation, the CEO of the Federation invited the entire interfaith community, and for good reason. 2 weeks before we launched our program, there was a shooting at a church a half-mile down the road from the Federation, from the JCC. So Danny invited the entire interfaith community. We had 110 people in the room that night. Only 40 of them were from the Jewish community. There were more interfaith representatives there that night than there were representatives of the Jewish community. And you know what? That was okay. That was pretty cool. The relationships that were started that night were incredible to watch, and they've endured to present day. So I think the interfaith piece of this is hugely important for the entire community. Thanks for reminding me.
I have a question, and I'm wondering, I might have missed it, I came in a little bit late, but you said that it's the responsibility of our greeters and our ushers to spot, to keep vigilant, and so on and so forth. And this is just like a general question. So somebody walks into the synagogue on a Saturday morning, and we don't know who they are. They're wearing a sport coat. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they have underneath their coat. And maybe they have bad intent, maybe they have good intent. And what's to stop that person from coming in? You introduce yourself, you say hello, something like that, but you don't really know what's going to happen. And where's the training that comes in for the ushers and the greeters to be able to disarm that person? To me, there's a disconnect there. And I know that you do training, but how are you going to train all these people that maybe are twice the age of the person who means malice?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. And I wouldn't say there's a disconnect. I understand what you're saying. The way I would describe it is being a greeter or an usher is not for everyone. So just as important as Andrew training greeters and ushers is who your organization chooses to be greeters and ushers. And you made a point about, you used the term disarming someone. Nobody's ever going to ask you to disarm anyone, first of all. So we'll be clear about that. But our greeter and usher training has two very important components to it. Actually, three really important components. I already talked about one of them, which was how to integrate your greeters and ushers with your law enforcement team or your professional security team. two other very important components of that training are what the Department of Homeland Security refers to as the power of hello. The power of hello, the power of walking up and engaging with someone. That's a whole kind of module in our greeter and usher training. And then another module in that training is what we refer to as de-escalation training. And our law enforcement partners know all about de-escalation training. We're not going to train greeters and ushers to be as proficient at that as our law enforcement partners are. But if you think about it this way, if you're a greeter or an usher and you are trained to first and foremost identify a potential problem or a potential threat and know what basic steps to take in response to that issue or potential threat, which oftentimes means getting your safety and security, your law enforcement team or your security team involved, or it may mean walking up and introducing yourself to that person. There's art and science involved in the decision-making process about how to engage someone that comes into your space that you don't know. And I can't give you the right answer to every scenario standing here right now, but what we can do is give you enough training, the right people, enough training to know how to do a basic response, know when to call 911, or know when it's okay to walk up and say hello to somebody. Hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better. Okay.
Do you do what the European synagogues are doing, which is require pre-registration?
Yeah, there's a lot of synagogues around the country in the United States that already do that. And not just for high holy days, for Shabbat services. Yeah. It's happening in the United States right now. It's not the right answer for every synagogue. Back to my point about the right answer for your synagogue's different from down the street. But it is happening around the country, no doubt.
I couldn't get into the Museum of Modern Art last week because I was coming into the city and I had a little roller bag. And prior to that, you could check it in the check when you went into the museum. Couldn't get even into the gift shop. So things are heightened.
Yeah, absolutely.
Grant, thank you so much, and thank you, Andrew. I think we're going to call it a night, but thank you, everybody, for joining us in person and virtually as well. If you have any other questions about our security initiative, please get in contact with the Federation. And again, we're very blessed to have SCN in our community.
Good night.
Yeah, absolutely. How was the crowd last night?
Just a little bit bigger than this. I think we had 50, right around 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's not bad.
Hello. Sure. Sure.
I'm Esther Kosowski, my husband's the rabbi, and I work in the office. You've said it a few times, but the best people I've been trained current police officers. And yet, as much as New York City.
It depends. Andrew can help you.
They're great to us, and we're great to them. We have a friend from my husband
if they're using police officers as armed security, you have to set expectations. The one thing that Andrew can help you with is providing your security. It's the other thing. With what we refer to as police orders. So police orders. So when you're at our concern, this is what it is.
We've actually written it up for them. And sometimes you wonder, is like, are they better outside where people see them driving by, or are they better being at the door and really helping so they be a deterrent?
Depends on what's happening. Yeah. No, great questions.
Thank you.
Yes, trust me.
Yes.
100%.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for coming and visiting our community.
Thank you.
I want to follow up on what you said about armed congregants. I know that you don't support the idea of armed congregants as a group inside.
We don't advocate.
Okay. The reality is that's what's happening because, especially when visiting.
Are you a B'nai Torah?
Mostly at the shul. But I'm a member of the Torah as well. And when I get to and from shul, clearly I'm Jewish. Jewish people have black coat and hats. So are many of my opponents. And I show up at shul, we still have licensed numbers, range efficient like a law enforcement officer, but for my self-protection going to a shul. How does the shul address it? How does the congregation address it? You have 60 people sitting in the shul. Shouldn't there be some kind of discipline for using them, for not using them, or tell them just to run like as you said?
Yes. So the paper that we're getting ready to publish addresses all of those concerns. If armed congregants are going to be a part of your program, here's the best practice. Here's how you should do it. So we don't, and I had two shuls in Indiana that utilize congregants. I wanted to not like it, but I liked it because I knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Up in northern Indiana, a small synagogue up there, the rabbi and her husband were both former IDF.
And get them much better than that.
Well, and they stayed current. They trained with the sheriff's department. They had a couple of congregants that were members of the sheriff's department. They developed a training program. They had 8 people on their team. They rotated. But they had a regular training program for the sheriff's department. And again, I didn't want to like it, but I liked it. They were doing it right. So and Andrew's going to be able to help me with this. I think the paper that we're shortly to publish is going to answer a lot of people's questions. I think some people, it's kind of a double-edged sword because some people are going to say, well, here we go, SCN's advocating for firearms in synagogues. We're not advocating for it. But if you're going to do it, we felt it was our responsibility to lay out the best practices.
That it's a reality.
Right.
Trying to make the best of it and utilize them as best you can.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again for your comments.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, thanks again for being here, guys. Appreciate it. So I went up there with a bad attitude. And I went up there. We had an ongoing formal training program at the church. And they were all kind of 8 people on the team, rotated facilities. I walked away from it with a completely different perspective. You know, because we, as an organization, that's why we're picking up this paper, because we recognize that it's happening. And we want to lay down the law. If you're going to do it, here's how you should approach it. And I think it's important. Solve the issue. Listen. Tiny little conservative synagogue with maybe, I think the office 35 or 40 people inside one, with 4 people protecting 4 sheepdogs every Saturday morning. And boy, were they on. Nobody wants to talk about that, but it's a reality.
I'm not worried about my proficiency. I'm not worried about it. The problem is their own protection, their own protection. So, notice.
The guy I was just talking to, what a lot of people don't understand, don't really hear. Concealed carry is not even if you shoot the right person for the right reasons, and you extend that to the when you really stop to appreciate the fact that one round down range, whether it's righteous or not, could be the end of this organization and the impact that that has on the community forever. People, and we're talking about this forever. Yeah. People don't think about it. I mean, my first encounter was about right across the street. He was the rabbi. Once I did, once we got some federal funding for lots of alarms and window film, kind of changed my dynamic. But his view was, so, I mean, that sentiment is out there. It's across the board. Your approach is on one end of the spectrum, his approach is on the other. Right? And we're talking is where reality and reason is. I don't blame them. They're the most visibly Jewish people in the community. But pushing towards justice, those are the conversations we start having. He's our social media agent, so cheap freedom with cheap gloves. Everybody makes fun of us when they apply. They're like, so these are, pleasure. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the partnership and support. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, sir. Very nice job.
You too. Thanks a lot.
I could have sworn you were FedEx when you were your speech.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, I'll be around tomorrow. Yeah, that's why I think Ray's idea was very good.